Welcome to Taking Care of Business on News Talk 1180 KERN for the best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock and on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock Saturday, and for the best in Wednesday Talk Radio on 1410 KERI, the Christian station. We're now on 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and also 3 times a week on the internet on knookmedia.com, serving Richmond, Oakland, and the San Francisco Bay Area. Your host is Clay Koerner, and I'm Marty Pay, and our producer is Greg Held. Hey, Clay, I can't remember the last time I laughed as much on the air as I did with you and Barry Goldwater. It was a funny show and very informative last week.
Well, first off, it was Barry Goldwater Jr.
That's true.
Yeah, we had a good time, Barry and I, didn't we?
Yeah, that was fun. He went after you pretty good. We have a great show lined up today. In the second half, we have best-selling author and journalist Jane Levy, who wrote 2 great bestsellers, The Last Boy, the story of Mickey Mantle, and A Lefty's Legacy, the story of Sandy Koufax. We're going to have a little fun in the second half. But in the first half, we have one of my favorite guests. We've had him on 2 or 3 times before. World-renowned terrorist and Middle East expert, advisor to Congress and members of the European Parliament, Fox News contributor and author, Dr. Walid Phares. Dr. Phares, welcome back to Taking Care of Business.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I understand your stations now are growing. This is great news.
Yes, yeah. We're if we keep this up, we might even make some money at this.
I think so, and I'll be with you.
There you go. Well, you've got a great new book out, The Lost Spring. It's very appropriate. So
it is absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one thing I wanted to start off with what a crazy world we're living in right now. Here we have a administration that's cutting the military down to World War II levels, pre-World War II levels. Do they just not get it?
Look, this is the biggest subject for discussion, not just for this year, but between now and 2016. What have we done in terms of national security, foreign policy, and specifically the Middle East with the ramifications that we see now going all the way to Ukraine and what's happening in Eastern Europe? We're just getting the news now that the Chinese are also flexing muscle. They want to push back against our presence in the Pacific. It's as if our position, the administration's position that is, with regard to the Middle East, specifically Iran, Syria, and Egypt, have sent signals to the rest of the regimes of the governments that do not see eye to eye with us, that they can do something very similar. So I am very concerned, and in this book, The Lost Spring, I'm explaining to the readers things that they may have not seen strategically from the inside, from the big picture, how we had an opportunity in 2011. That opportunity was not even predicted by the administration. They did not believe in it. And unfortunately, that opportunity was lost because what we have done in some cases, or not done in different cases in the Middle East, have caused the spring to be lost. At least one season is lost, and now we're looking forward for the next season, and what can we do to save it?
Well, and you bring up a good question. How did they miss it? How did the administration miss it?
Remember in 2010, in the fall of 2010, every fall, the U.S. government, the administration that is, they establish a national security estimate. If you read that estimate of 2010 and of 29, you don't see anything that has to do with forthcoming civil society rising and a race between seculars and the jihadists and the Islamists. I think this is where it begins. Rather than looking at what was happening, there were 2 things that were developed by the administration in 2009, and that's important to understand, and almost in one month. There was a speech delivered by the president in Cairo,
yes,
which was understood by the Muslim Brotherhood as a signal to them that they could become partners, and that emboldened them across the region. There was a letter sent to the Grand Ayatollah of Iran, end of May, early June of 2009, opening the path to what became last year this interim agreement with the regime. And the most important event before the Arab Spring was when the Iranian people, Marty, you remember, rose in June of 2009, 2 million people on the streets of Tehran, shaking off the foundation of a regime that has been causing a lot of trouble, not just to us, the United States, but to our allies in the region. And the position of Washington was, we're not going to meddle into this, not even in words. It encouraged the Iranians to do everything they've done over the past 3 to 4 years. So way before the Arab Spring, not only there was no understanding that it was coming, But there was a policy that went against what the United States has been trying to do for the previous 30 years with Iran, and maybe 20 years with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, we're becoming a paper tiger, definitely. We're having a conversation with Fox News contributor and author of a great book, The Lost Spring, Dr. Walid Phares. Dr. Phares, something you mentioned in the book, you talked about, I'm trying to think of how you put it, are policies based on faulty expertise, you said, imposed by petrodollar pressure groups under the last three administrations. Could you explain that comment?
Oh, absolutely. That actually explains to most Americans why we were getting faulty expertise. Under the previous administration, let's say since the Cold War, I don't want to go before the Cold War, under the last 2 years of the first Bush administration, the two presidential tickets of mandates of the Clintons, and, of course, throughout the Bush bureaucracy. The bureaucracies, I'm not talking about the administration at that time, the bureaucracies were often advised by academia, by scholarship, by universities. Now, on campuses across the nation, you have specialties such as Middle Eastern studies, the scholars who study the Middle East, and then they are, asked by or required to give their testimony to either Congress or the State Department or National Security Council or the administration. Now, what has been going on in this country for the last few decades is that petrodollars, meaning Gulf-based regimes that have a lot of petrodollars, sending donations to campuses and universities, targeting specifically Middle Eastern studies, Islamic studies, international relations, so that they had influence. And most of those who had influence in the United States over these Middle Eastern studies were fronts, organizations, fronts, or think tanks close to the Muslim Brotherhood. So you can imagine that a couple of generations of these experts have been raised, have been educated in a fashion that rendered them sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood views, or in some cases to the Iranian regime views. So here you have our bureaucracies for 2 decades being influenced by that view. Now, quickly, the administration under this administration espouses the same views of the previous bureaucracy. So now it's not just bureaucracy is not fulfilling what the Bush narrative was, which was a good narrative, but the bureaucracy did not carry out those guidelines. Now bureaucracy and the administration are going in one line. It's an apologist line.
You know, Doctor, I understand that NASA now must share all information with the Muslim community. And here at Edwards Air Force Base, what they have now is a Muslim executive or someone from the Muslim community that's mirroring every single NASA employee at Edwards Air Force Base. Were you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, but let me put my perspective. The issue is really not Muslim American community. The issue is the Muslim Brotherhood organization, and there's a big difference because as we saw, fortunately, we were able finally to see in the Middle East, these large civil societies had two components. One were the secular democracy people, dissidents, and what have you, who see eye to eye with us. And then the other edge were the Muslim Brotherhood, the Salafists, the jihadists, and what have you. But in between those two, we had something in the Middle East called silent majority. And that silent majority never expressed itself because they don't have the freedom. In the United States, in the West in general, those who pretend, and I'm going to underline that and let it be heard, those who pretend representing the majority of Muslim communities do actually not represent these communities. So they claim that they are defending religion and the community and what have you, but you go to Egypt and you go to the UAE and you go to Saudi Arabia. These are pretty Muslim countries. And what you hear from people there, both governments and political parties or association, is that the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is, I'm quoting them now, this is fresh information from the last 2 to 3 weeks, they are telling us that the Brotherhood has been receiving those petrodollars, including from Qatar, to claim in the West that they represent the communities here, and therefore they could affect national security, foreign policy to their advantage. Things have changed since then.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. When we come back from the break, let's talk a little bit about the Ukraine as well, okay?
Yes.
We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.